So let's say you found a skeleton. How would you tell it's a dinosaur? You personally, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
Hey there, YouTube, the Dapper Dinosaur here. When last we were here, Roger of Mud Fossil U was telling us that Velikovsky was right. Jesus is in fact Venus, the son of Zeus. Jesus hit Earth twice and Mars once before settling into Venus orbit somehow. And El Fuerte de Samaipata in Bolivia is not made of sandstone, as it very obviously is, but is instead a lung that was carved into while it was still raw, wet, and suffused with blood. This is, of course, because Roger doesn't have any experience with construction or butchery. Now he's going to tell us about the ancient construction equipment used to turn meat into buildings. Let's see what he has for us.
Now, I have a bunch of other shots from down there to show also working with equipment.
In the broad sense, of course, they were working with equipment. You don't do this kind of thing by hand. But I suspect he means that they were using relatively high-tech equipment comparable to modern construction vehicles.
All right, here's one here. They had they had one of these off-road vehicles or something with the tires.
Called it.
Coming straight down here.
I can't find anything about this rock, where it is, what it's made of, what the context is for the depression. The picture only appears on Facebook and Roger's channel, and I've checked like 5 or 6 different Facebook pages that allegedly have this picture, and failed to find the actual picture. So while I don't see any reason to think it's a tire mark, I can't say what's actually going on. But importantly, neither can Roger.
And you see him digging in and digging in and digging in and digging in. This was soft.
What is? That's an interesting hypothesis, but people can and do make weird marks in hard stone today. Also, I noticed that these depressions don't deform any of the striations that are clearly visible in the rock. If it had been soft when this depression was made, I would expect those striations to be deformed, and yet that's not the case. I can't say for certain what's going on here, but I can say that Roger's explanation is less likely than that the rock was dug into after it hardened, and unless he can tell me what source this is from and where I can go look into it, that's really all I have to go on.
It had to be soft when they did this.
Why? Why couldn't it be done with tools after the rock was hard? Does Roger think that humans can't cut into rock?
This was fairly right after the flood, I would say. It couldn't have been too long. These things would harden up, I would say, pretty quick.
Based on what? That's not what happens to organic tissue now. It doesn't turn into sandstone or granite or whatever. It mostly rots away, and when it doesn't, it's a fossil preserved in sedimentary rock. But that's chemically distinct and of a different texture than the surrounding rock. That's not what we're seeing here. And this isn't even a case of looks like. It doesn't look like any biological structure that I can think of.
No, and here's what tendons look like. See this? That's what a tendon looks like. This is what they cut through these and made walls and did all kind of things with these because they are tough.
So it's literally just that tendons and rock have striations sometimes. Okay, but in the tendons, the striations don't go deep into the structure. Whereas in the picture, the larger patterns were visible well into the rock depression, meaning that these are layers, not strands, as in the case of tendons. Further, it doesn't matter how tough the tendon is as a bit of organic matter, because according to Roger, it turns into rock, and what matters is the strength of the rock.
And there's no blood to speak of in them. And they're very, very, very tough.
Tendons do have less vascularization than most tissues, but they do have blood. But the example picture is not of a fresh tendon, but one that has been preserved, which involves draining body fluids like blood and synovial fluid.
And here's a situation where there was a batch of mirrors right here. This is a tendon right there.
Nope, that's Cusco, Peru, and that's just a rock. It's probably sedimentary, as a lot of the rock there is, and that's supported by the layers. If it's a tendon, then Roger is going to have to do a whole lot more than think it looks like one.
You see?
No, I don't. I see a rock. What about that rock makes it obviously a tendon? What tests can be done to confirm or falsify this identification?
That's a tendon, and they were cutting it and making these walls. And these things, they had to be cutting them when they were wet.
Nope, those walls were mostly diorite, which is not sedimentary, and you can see that the rocks that make up the walls do not have any striation patterns or a cross-section of tendon bundles. So the walls aren't even made of the same stone he's showing us. Further, we have artifacts and quarries from Peru that show us that they were using things like pounding stones and copper tools to do this work on hard stone. Just because Roger couldn't make these walls himself without modern technology doesn't mean that the ancient Peruvians couldn't.
Because look at this. Don't forget, you see these walls, everybody's, you can't fit a dollar bill in there. Well,
of course you can't. I couldn't fit a dollar bill between any random rocks that I stacked on top of each other because they're touching. How would I fit something between them? But yeah, the blocks are well matched, but you can do that with simple pounding sticks. You test fit the blocks, look at where they don't fit well, and then pound the rocks to even out that discontinuity. It's labor intensive, and to do it, it takes skill, but it's not something beyond the ability of ancient Peruvians. This is just the ancient aliens trope of assuming that essentially anyone outside of Europe couldn't do stonework. It's racist and it's untrue.
You can't. So how did they do it? Well, they did it because they were just like putty, and they're made out of this kind of stuff.
No, they have tool marks that indicate stonework, not meat work. And they're not even the same kind of rock as the rock in the foreground. They don't even look like the same rock.
They can go and look at this. They can go and find out if I'm right or wrong.
And they did, and Roger is wrong. It's as simple as that.
All right, so they're cutting it out and they're bringing it down. Now look at this. They're not doing this with copper chisels.
This is also from Cusco, specifically Sacsayhuaman. And also, why couldn't this be done with copper chisels? You know, you don't need chisels of any kind to like this video. Leave a comment, share the video, and subscribe. If you're enjoying the video, please consider doing all those things. It helps the channel grow, and if the channel isn't growing, it's shrinking.
It's insanity. They got some kind of a machine here that was taking these slabs out.
Yeah, a machine called a chisel.
And getting them ready, and they made these walls down here, and they had to have some kind of technology. There's some kind of serious technology here, my friends.
Yes, metallurgy is serious technology. So they did have serious technology, and that technology has been preserved in the archaeological record. In order to suggest that there was some other technology that has not been preserved that was used to make these cuts, one would have to show that they could not have been made by the technology that is evident. But we know that ancient Peruvians could make copper tools. We have examples of them. We know that copper can chisel into rocks like diorite because it's been done. Sure, the copper wears down fast, but that's an inconvenience, not something that makes the work impossible. This is an Occam's razor situation. Roger is suggesting that we add in tools that we have no evidence for and that are not necessary to explain the evidence we do have. There's no reason to think that Roger is right, and we should prefer the simpler explanation that the tools that were used to make Sacsayhuaman are the tools that we know existed and that we know are up to the task.
You see this?
Back to this rock from who knows where.
Had the same thing back then as they do now.
That doesn't look like anything in the depression in our mystery rock. Not in the least. This isn't even pareidolia. It's just making shit up.
What can I say? They were working. They knew what they were doing.
That's true.
You can tell it's true because they accomplished the tasks they set out to do, like building cities, fortresses, temples, and farming terraces. If they didn't know what they were doing, we wouldn't have such structures.
I understand how all these little bumps are on these. This is some seriously good tendon, and this is a ponderosis tendon.
This is a wall from Ollantay Tambo. We don't know for sure what the bumps are for, but one obvious option is that they were now eroded projections to help with hoisting. A rope could have been tied around them for dragging or even lifting.
The other tendon, the big longs, well, this one here is a ponderosis tendon.
I think Roger is trying to say aponeurosis. This is not technically a tendon, but similar, and they cover muscles as well as serve as an insertion point for muscles onto or into bone. These structures are usually very thin and not the sort of thing you could even carve a whole block out of. Even with a colossal giant, they'd still likely only be a few inches thick.
The other tendon was this style here.
That's very obviously a big block of igneous or metamorphic rock. Nothing in there indicates a tendon. It doesn't even have the sedimentary laminae that made Roger think other rocks were tendons.
Is like a rope-style tendon or Achilles heel, that type of thing.
With just no explanation. Okay. Also, where's the rest of the creature? Why does Roger's meat world have just a bunch of scattered lungs, tendons, and such, all disassociated from the rest of the anatomy of these creatures? Was there an organ fairy that went around sprinkling body parts haphazardly all over the earth after Roger's flood?
And this is Achilles heel, probably, or it could be a tendon. Well, that's a pretty long tendon. I would say that's an Achilles heel.
So both the obviously not sedimentary rock and also this very obviously sedimentary rock are the same tendon? Okay, there's literally nothing that he's seeing to make him come to these conclusions. This is beyond pareidolia. This is just Roger being delusional. At least most of the time with Roger, I can see what he sees that makes him come to these absurd conclusions. But now he's just seeing things that aren't there, or failing to see things that are.
And they just used it right here.
Except that that rock isn't in use by anyone. It's just a rock sticking out of the dirt.
And that's why they fit so nice together. This was all moist-ish, I would say.
Right, but Roger's say-so means less than nothing. Anything Roger claimed as true, I would suspect is false simply because Roger claimed it. Roger is wrong about virtually everything he ever says, except when he says, with false humility, that he could be wrong. And I can tell it's false humility because so much of what he says is so obviously wrong and has been checked on before he ever said it, that if he were actually interested in the possibility that he could be wrong, he is sure to have realized by now that he is, in fact, egregiously wrong about virtually everything.
Either that or they had to have some way of, well, no, they wouldn't, because the guy drove over this thing. They had four-wheelers.
I love that bit. You can tell Roger is starting to think just the tiniest bit critically about his ideas, and then he realizes what's going on and reverses course immediately. He can't let even an ounce of doubt creep in. Honestly, I covered this guy just to try to understand how his mind works. It's generally impossible, but every once in a while, as here, we get a little window into the brain that thought that a statue in France was actually a corpse with rooms in it.
All right, they couldn't just go and everything gets soft. I suppose they could, and they drive over, but I don't see why they would do that.
So now the ancient Peruvians don't just have four-wheelers, they also have stone softening technology? Doesn't that make the whole meat hypothesis redundant? What makes Roger think that they had the tech to soften rocks? Also, what does Roger think of the actual stone and copper tools that we found? Why do the ancient Peruvian construction tools have four-wheelers, meat carving tools, advanced stone transmutation wands or whatever, but also stone pounders and copper chisels? I've done electrical work on many construction sites, and generally neither mine or anyone else's toolbox had stone or copper tools. What was different about the hyper-advanced post-Diluvian Peruvians? And why, when the Incas were at war with the Spanish, did they not break out these tools? Did they lose them? How? Where are the remains of such tools?
I think everything was soft just because everything was soft.
I think Roger's brain is soft, just because, well, Roger's brain is soft. One group of people with rock-hard brains, or something, are my patrons on Patreon. My Patreon is linked in the description, and it's one of the best ways to support me. Being a patron costs as little as $1 a month, and there's a 15% discount for pledging annually. You get months of early access to videos like this, access to my Discord for supporters only, and even more perks at higher tiers.
So anyway, that's, and then they put these walls together. And look at this now. They cut these from the bodies of whatever these creatures were. I don't know what they were, but they were enormous.
Or they cut them out of a rock quarry. Why is that not an option? Roger has to make everything more difficult for no discernible reason other than his own psychological satisfaction.
And normally you'd have some nice, good, clean tendon. But every now and then, you see they get this?
Weathering? Yeah, I see weathering.
I believe that's a bone.
On the basis of what? So if I just go chip away enough tendon, it suddenly looks like bone? I'll say this, Roger can still surprise me, unlike most young Earth creationists. He's got that going for him.
All right, and this is the tendon it came down to, and they figured it's big enough, it's heavy duty enough, throw it up there.
But bones are bigger and heavier duty than tendons in general, so why build the wall out of tendons at all if bones the size of mountains are available? And really, the whole wall looks more like bone than any tendon anyway, so I'm not sure why Roger has settled on tendon. Of course, everything I'm saying ignores the fact that animals just can't be as big as Roger thinks they were. They couldn't support their own weight, they couldn't move nutrients and oxygen around their bodies, and their nerve signals would take many minutes to go from extremity to brain and back.
Because the weight is coming down here, that's not going to fail.
I don't know what that means. The wall hasn't failed yet because it's well constructed, that's true, but I feel like that's not what he meant.
But it's, I believe it's a bone.
I believe it's not, and luckily for me, all the archaeologists and geologists are on my side.
And then they use some other sort of garbage up here. I don't know why. Usually they're using nice clean ones, but maybe they ran out. I don't know.
Remember how this is supposed to be about the flood? I sure would like it if we could circle back to the flood, rather than just picking random bits of construction and making up a body part for them to be made of. I was actually just thinking that it's odd that Roger doesn't actually make up new body parts, but then I realized he has done that. He made up tendon balls, which aren't a real thing, and he says that that's what sedimentary concretions are. The enormity of Roger's stupidity is too big to fit inside my mind all at once. It's like beholding the actual presence of God or something, except it's a god of stupidity.
And I don't know why they would have built these walls like this.
They're on a mountain with a steep slope. The walls separate various levels of terraces, allowing the steep slope to be divided into flattish areas for living in or farming on. They're basically retaining walls, and with retaining walls, the bigger the stones are, the better. They're also in a place prone to earthquakes, and the irregular shapes help prevent collapse because there's no single line along which the earth can vibrate that will allow the blocks to easily topple. The walls aren't hard to understand if you know the context for them.
Were they afraid of another flood, maybe?
No, because there wasn't a first one. They were afraid of earthquakes, a still common occurrence there.
That's possible.
Except there's no evidence these walls are waterproof or anything. But we have proof positive they resist earthquakes, because they have done so, or they wouldn't still exist. So, I think it's safe to say that the walls are there to protect from earthquakes. Why is that not enough? Why does Roger need it to be not that? Is he just a contrarian? Does he just hate the degree to which everyone with more than one brain cell has ostracized him? So now he just has to deny anything they say? I don't know. Put your guesses in the comments.
But where did they get the equipment to do this?
They made it themselves. They weren't dumb.
There's so many questions.
Yeah, but so many of them have answers. Roger doesn't want those answers, though. He wants his own special answers. Also, where's his feather? I miss the feather. Roger, bring back the feather.
And I don't have the answers.
Well, he has answers. I don't know about the answers, though.
There was 5-fingered humans here. They all have 5 fingers. Well, not all of them. I don't know. I looked around. They look like 5 fingers to me.
So there were humans with varied numbers of fingers, apparently leaving simplistic carvings of handprints that look like what a child might draw, and not actually like real handprints. Okay, got it. I feel like they were probably just all humans with 5 fingers, one of which was a thumb, but what do I know? I'm just a dinosaur. I bite the head off of sauropods.
And all over. So this was wet, and this is either bloodish area or it's some kind of soft tissue.
These are petroglyphs at Kodachrome Basin State Park in Utah. They're carved into sandstone. The only indication of blood is the red color, but again, things besides blood are red. Further, if you look at high-quality images of these, they don't actually look much like handprints.
So there appeared to be a lot of people that survived this catastrophic flood.
So, like, the opposite of what happens in most flood narratives. Okay, then?
I don't know. I don't know how they did it.
There wasn't a flood for them to survive. That's how they did it. Also, how does this connect to Jesus bumping into Earth twice and then into Mars? Did that cause the flood? If so, how?
when you read some of the stuff that Velikovsky wrote about what the ancient text said.
Something he couldn't tell you since he didn't speak most of those languages, if any of them. And those who do speak them tell us that's not what they say.
And somebody would have to be there to record these ancient texts, so...
Yes, someone had to record the ancient texts, but that doesn't make them true. It's like saying someone had to be there to make a copy of the 1995 film No Way Back, but that doesn't make Russell Crowe an FBI agent. In fact, nothing in that movie indicates that Russell Crowe was an actual FBI agent or ever was one. Just like nothing in any ancient religious text is actually evidence of a physically impossible flood, or an even more physically impossible planetary collision between Jesus and Earth.
They survived a lot better than anybody expected, or I would have expected.
Okay.
So let's dig a little deeper into this.
I don't even know how that could be possible, but let's go.
But the creatures' bodies were so enormous that the tendons were like this.
That is in fact columnar basalt, not tendons. Columnar basalt happens when basaltic magma cools very slowly, and because not all areas will cool at the same rate, the overall contraction from different cooling is concentrated in different places. As a result, the rock contracts to form pillars with roughly polygonal fractures, forming what is basically a Voronoi noise pattern. The cracks form at the maximum distance between the neighboring contraction points. This is not how the fibers of a tendon form, and their shape is not dependent on the locations and shapes of the neighboring strands, meaning that they do not form this Voronoi pattern. So in fact, this does not look like a tendon, unless of course you just don't know what a tendon looks like.
They break off because they're in chunks. I'll show you in a second. And then they come out of bundles of tendons, smaller, 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 until you get down to this size, which is still pretty damn big.
Which isn't what the rock is doing, so once again we have no reason to think that this rock could be a tendon, and good reasons to know it wasn't.
All right, so those tendons, they actually use a wall in Rome. I'll show you. Well, here's a wall right here.
This, of course, is a retaining wall from the Temple of Apollo at Delphi in Greece. An interesting fact about this wall is that it is inscribed with thousands of inscriptions declaring the manumission or freeing of slaves. Presumably, for thousands of people, this wall represented their freedom. Also, you'll never guess what this irregular polygonal masonry has in common with the previous polygonal masonry we've seen in South America. Or maybe you will. It's that they're both in earthquake-prone regions of the Earth. The irregular shapes help protect the wall from earthquakes, hence its survival for thousands of years. Further, it's a wall. This isn't even a natural formation. The rocks were placed by humans.
The tendons were coming all out this way, and they just broke them off flat. And you think, oh, that must have been hard to break them off flat. No, watch this.
Yep, Roger thinks that the rocks extend way back into the hill, but they don't. It's a retaining wall, not a natural formation. Roger could just look this up, and if he thinks he's being lied to, he could go rent some equipment and get some permissions and go look. But really, he doesn't need to, because in the picture he's showing us, we can see that the stones of the retaining wall do not go all the way back, and are in fact less deep than they are wide in most cases. The picture itself debunks him.
They're made that way. You see them? You see the little tendon blocks?
I see that tendons come in strands. That doesn't mean that anything that has a strand-like structure when viewed from a particular angle is a tendon. Just like this island isn't actually a dolphin, irregular masonry and columnar igneous rocks aren't tendons.
They're made that way. That's why you see it, and you see all these different colors. There's, I think, 28 or something different collagens, keratins, or whatever, but
I'm not sure what he means there, but I also doubt very much that it matters.
These are what the collagen bundles. And you see the different colors mean they're different tensile strengths, they have different, all kinds of different characteristics.
So I thought that was pretty unlikely to be the case, that these fibrils, which is what those strands are called, were colored based on type. For one thing, each one seemed to have a separate color, and for another thing, they look like each color was picked at random by assigning a random value from 0 to 1 on each of the red, blue, and green channels, assuming normalized channel values. I know this because that's a function I can use in Blender to help keep track of which objects in a 3D scene are separate. Because of how the math works out when you do that, the vast majority of the colors are sort of a low saturation pastel color. So I checked into this picture. It's a figure from the paper Evidence of Structurally Continuous Collagen Fibrils in Tendons by Renee B. Svensson et al., published in Acta Biomaterialia on March 1st, 2017. And indeed, the fibrils are color-coded not by type, but just with each one given a random color to make it easier to keep track of which one is which. The only thing I can think of is that Roger made this up. He saw differently colored fibrils and just decided that they have been color-coded by some type of fibril that he just made up. He didn't investigate, he didn't give us the citation, he just stated with confidence that his hunch was right.
But
That's how I feel too.
that's how they break off flat like that. It's not that they just, this wall here, somebody worked real hard to do that. They plugged a few little holes down here. It was just threw some junk under there.
I mean, it's quite possible that those sections are patches, I don't know, and I'm not going to look into it that much, but at least the idea that there are patches is reasonable. But the problem is that it's not really compatible with the idea that this wall is actually a sliced through tendon that extends back into the hill. One group of people that would definitely patch up a failing retaining wall to preserve a temple for future generations are my channel members. The join button is right below this video. It starts at only $1 a month, and you get early access to videos like this, access to my supporters-only Discord, channel emojis, monthly milestone chats, and more.
And here and there, up here, I think this is not, well, I don't know what this is. That could have been part of this.
Wait, I thought Roger had figured out that they were fibrils from a tendon. Is he backing off that claim?
And the outside edge of the membrane, I don't know. But these are all bundles, and they just broke off these edges, and they said, okay, make a wall through there, and out they go.
I love that one of the stones up there has the full extent of its depth on screen, and he just doesn't notice. Roger needs to have his brain studied by science, because clearly something is going wrong with his ability to think and observe.
And up here, they probably realize this stuff is tough. It's not going to move. And if you build on top of that, you're in good shape. Your palace is not going to fall over.
Well, temple, not palace, but I guess you could say it's a palace for Apollo. But also, I love how he also doesn't notice that the irregularity in the shapes stops at the top and the stones have a flat top where they are still in place. Obviously, this would not be the case if the wall was simply a cross-section of giant fibrils, but Roger doesn't even notice, and we're on to something else.
I'm pretty sure these are tendons. And these are tendon bundles, and you see the different colors represent different types of tendons, collagens.
These aren't even tendon fibers, they're muscle fibers, and the coloring is by the scanning electron microscope that took the picture, which can't analyze chemical composition, which means that the color isn't based on some kind of chemically differentiated type of fiber. So other than this is a picture of fibers, everything Roger has said about this is wrong.
As I showed you over here, the different colors of these collagen bundles, but they're still in little tiny blocks.
Roger understand a single scientific figure from any paper challenge. Level? Impossible.
And if you break them right, you can break them straight across the top, as clean as can be. And I showed that in this right here, look.
And this picture isn't cleanly broken, so I'm not sure what I'm supposed to take away from this.
All right, so this is coming out of here somewhere. All right, so somewhere down, way down in the earth is one of these, a big bundle.
You know, string cheese, which is basically just sticks of mozzarella, also breaks into strands. Do you think Roger would think that a stick of string cheese that's been pulled apart is actually a tendon? If not, then why not? If the reason is that he knows where cheese comes from, then I know where retaining walls and columnar igneous formations come from. But I doubt he'd take my word for it, or that he'd investigate any of my sources.
And it's going to have smaller and smaller and smaller. By the time it gets up here to the earth, you're somewhere, at least in this range here. You could be right here, it doesn't matter.
It does matter because the collagen fibril is at the molecular scale, and clearly these columnar formations are not at the molecular scale. Collagen is a molecule. You can't just make giant collagen molecules the size of masonry stones.
But you're still in these little enclosures. All right, stand back and look at it. You see the patterns, they're not perfect. But that's okay. It's probably down in this area, one of these.
Yes, things look like things, so they must be those things. I think it looks like a beehive made by drunk bees, so why isn't it that? Roger couldn't say.
And all of those are just cleaned off. Of course, it's by the ocean. I imagine the ocean has something to do with that. But if...
I mean, to be fair, that is a decent explanation for why this would be so uneven, but the wall at Delphi would be so smooth in terms of relief. Fair enough. Roger gets a single solitary point.
If a crew of people did it, you could probably do the same thing.
Okay, sure.
Okay, you first of all have to come to the realization that geology is biology.
First of all, are we looking at a picture of Roger's computer on Roger's computer? How does this man make his production decisions? Does he? In a later video, will we see a picture on his computer, on his computer, on his computer, on his computer? Also, geology isn't biology because rocks aren't alive.
This is a...
It's a rock. It's just a rock. It looks sedimentary because I can see layering, and I can't see any crystals that would make me think it's igneous. Also, the layering looks pretty uniform and straight, making me think that this rock probably hasn't had any metamorphic processes happen to it.
I think it's like probably a shoulder or something like that, or whatever. Some kind of creature had a ball and socket type thing up here.
Up where? I don't see any kind of socket for a ball and joint anywhere on that rock. Usually I can tell what Roger is talking about, but this time it seems that nothing looked like anything biological, so he just made it up. Further, does Roger think that rocks can't break? Like, he's seen rocks break before, right? So how, assuming he's right and that rocks are all actually organic remains of giants or whatever, can he tell that what he's looking at isn't a later breakage rather than an original part of the organism this came from?
They could move and do this, and it had this pin and a tendon, and then into muscle. All right, and here it is right up here.
Nope, still don't see what he's even pointing at. I mean, I physically see it, but I don't see what about this makes any of it seem like a joint, like a muscle, or like a tendon.
So you have this piece, is this piece right here. All right, it locks the tendon into the shoulder ball or whatever.
When even Roger can't tell me what body part a rock is supposed to have been, then I know it really doesn't look like anything. This man is a pareidolia champ, and even he is failing on this one.
But it goes to a pin, a round spot. You see that round spot right there?
Nope, I do not.
And then it comes out. It's pretty white right in this area because there's a lot of tension right there. And then you got all lots and lots and lots and lots of little stripes coming down here.
But those stripes aren't localized to this concavity. They're all over the rock, so the stripes can't be used to differentiate one part of the rock from another. Those are just laminae, probably from cyclic variations in depositional rate or deposition type. If you want to say some one part of the rock is so special, you have to actually point out features that distinguish it from the other parts of the rock, not features that unite it with the whole rock. All doing the latter does is show that it's a part of the same rock, which I do not dispute, nor can I imagine why anyone else would dispute it.
Because it's got to move like this. When it has to move like that, they have to slide among themselves.
I got nothing. If you think you know what that was supposed to mean, put it in the comments.
The center one is really solid.
The center one of what? What is he talking about? Maybe Roger should do this live so that people can actually ask him what he's talking about when he does this and seems to just be making up parts of the rock or aspects of the rock that no one else can see. Like, am I the crazy one? He's not pointing to anything distinct, right?
And you see that in this here. This is the same shot again, real close. There's the ball.
That's just the margin of the concavity. There's no ball. Does Roger have his own special meaning for the word ball? Because for me, it's an object with a roughly spherical shape, or that is used in a sporting event as a focal point for play, or the anatomical slang. I'm not seeing any of those.
That ball anchors this to the shoulder.
The non-existent ball anchors a concavity in a bit of rock to a shoulder that is also not evident. Okay, I guess I kind of follow.
And out of that ball comes the really strappy stuff. See the white heavy-duty stuff?
I see lighter color laminae, yeah, but that's not strappy. It's layers that go through the rock like stacked pancakes, not like fibers in a wire bundle.
And it's got to twist up this way, and then go. It starts to have less and less mineral into the muscle, and then now you get into the red muscle. Over here, there's almost no blood at all. You don't need any blood. You need a real thin, slippery, slimy synovial fluid, and it's more slippery than anything there is.
I'm going to press X to doubt that synovial fluid is the slipperiest thing in existence. But whatever. What blood does Roger think he's seeing? Does he mean the warmer light to the left of the picture? Because that looks like the effect of the rock being lit by different things. Probably an incandescent light on the left and something either fluorescent or LED based on the right. Didn't Roger take this picture? It sure would have been nice if he had given it flat, even lighting so that we can tell the difference by the rock's intrinsic color, and so we don't have to rely on changes in lighting. Or if he just had the rock on his desk, like he did when the picture was taken.
Look at this.
That actually looks like a really cool physics cheat sheet. I kind of want one.
Synovial joints in humans, and basically that's what we're working with here. It's static friction 0.01, 0.003, and nothing even comes close.
Yeah, nothing on that list. But that list only has 12 entries. Superfluid helium is way more slippery. I don't know why Roger would think that his list of 12 things encompasses the top and bottom range of friction coefficients in the world, rather than just common or representative choices.
Just static, just sitting there not doing anything, kinetic moving around. It's hundreds of times more efficient than anything else.
I'm impressed that he actually knows the difference between static and kinetic friction that well. To elaborate, static coefficient of friction tells you how much energy it would take to start an object in motion, whereas the dynamic coefficient is how much energy is lost to friction in order to keep an object moving. It's more complex, and I'm sure an actual physicist would go far more in-depth, but hey, I'm just a dinosaur. What do I know?
That exists. Ice on ice, Teflon on Teflon, no.
There are indeed more slippery things that aren't on Roger's cheat sheet. But I do not know why that would matter. Is he saying that rock is slippery?
Now this is the abrupt transition.
What abrupt transition? So I guess it's time for linguistics, Dapper. Because I'm not a linguist, but I know a thing or two. So the is the definite article in English. It indicates that the noun following it is a particular instance of a group from among a larger group, with which instance the listener is familiar. For instance, consider these sentences. I saw a man walk into the bar and hang his hat on a coat stand. The man then ordered a whiskey neat. In the first sentence, a man indicates that this man is one among the category of men, but it is not established which one. In the second sentence, he becomes the man, because now he has been introduced to the listener. He is a particular man, the one whom I saw enter the bar and hang his hat. So now he is definite. So for Roger to say that this is the abrupt transition, it implies that he has previously introduced the concept of an abrupt transition, but he has not. Now you know more about what definite articles are for.
Okay, and then it starts to get mineral, and it's mineralized heavily in the beginning part.
The whole thing is mineralized. It's a rock. It's all made of minerals.
And then it gets more and more and more blood. You see, these are transition zones.
I thought those were the tendon fibers. Roger can't even keep his own fantasy straight. At least with flat earthers and young earth creationists, their fantasies make interesting fantasy worlds for like a TTRPG setting. Roger's fantasy isn't even coherent.
That's where the minerals are starting. We don't really need you much anymore. And then it goes into muscle, and then it gets into real sarcomeres, and that's it, the sarcomeres.
Sarcomeres are part of muscle fibers, but I don't know what it means for them to be it. I also don't know what this has to do with minerals. Is he saying that the muscles have more minerals than tendons? I might need a Roger whisperer.
But right up here, it has to have something tough to hold on to this, which is the tendon.
Remember when this was supposed to be about the flood? Is Roger going to get back to that?
Now let me show you why let me show you. This is exactly the same thing I showed you before.
I mean, yes, in that it's a bunch of sedimentary rock, but in this case, it's a bunch of different strata rather than just one rock with some laminae. Specifically, this is Dunbrista. Forgive my pronunciation, any Irish speakers in the audience. which is a pillar of Carboniferous rock off the east coast of Ireland.
There would have been a bone over here that this would have locked into with the same pin and a heavy-duty white stuff, which is that's the real strappy stuff.
It looks like it's just limestone with that fairly uniform light color and all. Are we sure that it's not just limestone? Also, what makes Roger think that the bone was on the right side of the image and not the left?
Connective tissue. And then you got a zillion little slippery spots.
Looks like shale to me.
Up and down. That's all it is. This one here gives you the strength in the middle to hold everything. And these have to bend, and this pivots. And now, bones didn't make it too well, and muscle didn't make it well at all.
Which is weird since the bone already starts out more or less as rock, whereas the muscles and tendons are soft, squishy stuff that decays a lot faster than bone. Indeed, many cultures around the world have burial practices that occur in two stages. A first stage where the flesh is allowed to rot off, and a second stage where the bones are then collected and placed somewhere for permanent burial. You can see this in places like the catacombs of France, where the skeletons were reinterred once the flesh was gone. Whole cultural practices around burial rely on the very simple fact that bone rots last.
So this thing sticking up here is only explained by the fact that there was a body here.
Or by a few tens of millions of years of the deposition of fine grains of lime and weathered rock from elsewhere. That would also explain it, and it has the advantage of actually taking into account the chemistry and structure of Dunbrista, unlike Roger's explanation, which doesn't really even account for the overall shape of the formation.
And there was some kind of a bone there, and then it went into a muscle here, and that just washed away. But this is exactly identical to what I have in my specimen right here. There's no difference whatsoever. Here's where the pin is.
It's hard for me to imagine how much less similar they could look while both being rocks.
And all that white stuff comes down here. And then you got a million different little... You can't see it well. I could put it in a microscope, but I'm not gonna.
Tell me in the comments if you think Roger owns and knows how to operate a microscope.
There is no difference.
Except for the vast differences in size, probably age, heterogeneity, chemical composition, etc., etc. Other than that, no difference at all.
And they say millions of years. In one picture, millions of years. No, the thing fell over dead.
Except that the millions of years option has both evidence and precedence, and the advantage of not being impossible under our current understanding of biology, chemistry, geology, and history. Roger's idea has neither evidence nor precedence and violates basic laws of virtually all branches of science. And he doesn't even have the advantage of Dunbrista looking like some muscle and tendon, because it doesn't. I mean, we can see in his picture that the end of the rock that should be divided into polygonal structures like Roger indicated were a sign of tendons in places like the retaining wall at Delphi or whatever columnar basalt he was looking at, aren't there. We can see that this rock lacks that texture. Instead, the horizontal layers just go through from one end to the other, which means this rock doesn't even have the structure that Roger himself says indicates tendons and muscles. So it doesn't even look like a tendon or muscle by Roger's own criteria.
And then it's just whatever eroded away, and whatever was tough, and it still remained. Okay, this should at least...
Whiplash back to El Fuerte de Semipata. Okay, cool. And remember, this is supposed to be a lung that has to do with the flood of Noah somehow, which was confusingly caused by Jesus, who is the planet Venus getting birthed by Jupiter, which is both the god Zeus and a gas giant hitting Earth twice.
Give some kind of questioning to what's going on here. How did this happen? How did that looks like pretty good equipment to me.
Yeah, the Incas, being, humans, are and were pretty clever. They made effective tools for stonework. The only reason I can think of that should be surprising is a bit racist. But then again, Roger will also claim that famous and recent European statues are actually mud fossils, so maybe he just thinks that all humans regardless of race are just incapable of working stone, and this is more down to him being oblivious and a moron than it is to racism. I'm not sure which one I'd prefer. Probably the latter, since that's at least not a character flaw.
Now, I suppose they could have done that with copper chisels, but I don't think so.
Well, they demonstrably could have, although it wasn't just copper chisels.
And again, this is very intriguing, and this can be looked at and checked.
It sure can, and it has been. It's sandstone. That is to say, it's hardened sand grains held together by some chemical binder. It's not made of fossilized lung.
And as far as I can see, as close as I can get to it is this. And to me, I would say, anytime you see green, that means there's a little bit of blood coming out of there.
Okay, so now black, red, and green indicate blood? Maybe. And just maybe. It's actually some lichen growing on the rock, because in close-ups, it sure looks like the rock hosts lichen. So that seems like a more likely explanation than that this is the lung of Giant Spock from the Infinite Vulcan, Season 1, Episode 7 of Star Trek the Animated Series.
And lungs have a tendency to be made out of blood, and I think that could be a lung.
Lungs have a tendency to be made of blood. Well, I don't even think I need to explain why that's insane.
And it would come down, basically right down here, and it would swoop around to the bottom.
The blood would? So much of this video is me not even knowing what Roger is trying to say.
I have lungs here. I have one here that was DNA tested. Well, that's right here. This is the size of it. It would be like this.
Roger claims to have had that rock DNA tested and has never said where it was done or shown the results. I think he's just lying about that.
And this would be peeled off. This was DNA tested, and it was CAT scanned.
At this point, it's paperwork or you're a liar.
And that's the type of fabric that's on the outside. It's called pleura, because this thing has rubber.
I believe he means the pleural sac, which is a membrane that surrounds and protects the lung.
Just rubbery all day long. And that, to me, I can see it.
Which isn't evidence.
Now, this one was in the Great Flood, too. You see how flat it is?
Yeah, I see that rock, that is very obviously a rock, and that has no anatomical markings of a lung, like lobes or being hollow, is kind of flattish on one side.
It's flat like that because it laid down like this, and the guy's heart was with it, too, because the heart still has the aortic arch where the heart was underneath, shows where that arch right there, that's the curve.
But it doesn't have bronchial tubes. So we can see the impression of the heart, but there's no indication of how air got in there? Yeah. Or maybe some rocks are just kind of flattish and have divots, and some people have an overactive imagination.
And it was DNA tested, and it's human mitochondrial DNA.
Says the guy who thinks that statues are fossils.
And I dig into them deep, and it was excellent quality. I have all the tests, and if somebody doesn't want to believe it, well, do the tests. I've already done it.
How would I even do the test? Am I supposed to ask Roger to send me the rock so that I can have it tested? Also, if he's done the test and people don't believe he has, which I don't, then he should just show the results so they can be checked on. What lab did the testing? What is on the lab reports? Can we contact the lab to verify that you paid them to do tests? Nope, none of that.
I'm not doing them again.
Yeah, no one is asking him to. We just like to have some evidence that he did them at all, because right now he's giving off Ron Wyatt or Ed Warren vibes, where he says he has lots of evidence of his wild bullshit claims, but he doesn't have it right now. And also, no, you can't see it. But trust him, it's there, and it's wonderful evidence. Very convincing.
And this stuff here, that really intrigues me. But nobody seems to be deeply interested. Well, I don't know. Let me just leave it at that.
And that's how that video ends. I was hoping for more flood rather than just to point at some random rocks and declaring what parts of the body they must be on the basis of not even looking like that part of the body for the most part. Also, Roger is completely ignorant of how anti-earthquake stonemasonry works, and so is consistently baffled by it. Oh well, this was a fun diversion. Next up, I'm going to take a look at Answers in Genesis. If you liked this video, please hit like and let me know what you liked in the comments. If you didn't like it, then hit dislike and let me know what the problem was. Either way, I hope you subscribe and check out the channel memberships and my Patreon. I'm the Dapper Dinosaur.
Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above.
Benthovend, Tapioca Weasel, Sphincter of Doom, Regios, Landon Knoll, Ian Chen, Elleron Teller, Phil Rivara, Kelvin Brostek Van Manen, David Hercules, Joshua Geese, Dan Sheedy, Pegajace, The Plastic Mouse, Arrow Dodger, Gordon Love Science, Prixie Purple, Agricola Sequa, S. Kenneth Swenson, Edwin M., Lance Hall, and John Ackerman.
It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 15% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.